So welcome, Mary Esther Judy from Fallen Star Stories. We spoke to you just a short while ago about your recommendation of children's picture books
Mm,
for 2021 during this difficult time of lockdown, and how picture books can support children of a very young age through the difficulties of lockdown, the anxiety, and all the different questions they have. Now
yes.
we on this part of our series, we're talking about 8 to 12-year-olds and onwards, so the more sophisticated child. Um,
He's got a bit of a grasp on things now. Yeah.
yeah. So tell us, tell me all about your recommendations. I'm going to sit back because I know you're excellent at what you do. You're a reviewer for so many publishers in Ireland and abroad. I couldn't even compete with your knowledge when it comes to children's books. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy this now. So 8 to 12-year-olds, what's the first book you're recommending?
Well, I think first of all, I think it's very important to keep them enthused about reading. It can be difficult at this time because they are stuck at home. They're not getting the feed from the outside world that they would normally get. Um, and they can get kind of overwhelmed by the obligation. And one thing I would say, particularly as we're going from 8 to 12, which is the golden age of reading, really, that's when the kids are picking up the books and really going for it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's very important to not make it seem like a chore. You know what I mean? This is what they do for their enjoyment, for their entertainment.
And how do we do that? How do we make it feel that it's not a chore?
You just have, it's all in the presentation. And
Okay.
if we go back to, sit down and even though they're not little teeny kids anymore, sit down and read with them.
Mm,
Find a book to share with them.
yeah.
I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I don't know. It's a big job, this business of education online. So what I'm hoping is that the teachers are picking up on that and doing things like reading the class books online with them. Pick a book, and this is our class book for, the next couple of weeks, and we're going to read a chapter a day or anything like that.
Yeah.
Again, letting them see you read,
Yeah.
engage them in a conversation about books. What was the last book you read? What are you reading now? What's that about? How do you feel about that? And really just kind of making it part of the things that we do every day. We wash our hands, we brush our teeth, we eat our food, we read our books, we do this, we do that. And just picking up on also what their other interests are and providing them with books that tie into that. If you've got a kid that likes nature and the great outdoors, get them a book that can be. It doesn't have to be a fact book, but it can be a novel that takes place outside in
I
the animal world.
yeah,
And
I have to say, I fell in love with the book. I the first primary school I was in, there was no interest in books there.
yeah,
There was no interest, and it was awful. It really was awful. Like there was no interest,
yeah,
no fun, no storytelling. And the second primary school I went to, there was such an engagement of us in books. We were brought to the
right,
library. We were read to. The teachers read to us, and
yeah.
it's like, and we talked about
That
this book.
makes a huge difference.
And it, and my, and in that second school, we ran Run to Earth, and
Oh,
it was so amazing to have a book.
the Fox books, they're brilliant. Yeah.
Have a book about things that I see in my daily life, because I had one foot in the country and one foot in the city. Even though I was in an inner city school, my heart was still in the countryside, and with horses
Okay.
and animals and all.
Marguerite, I've got a guy at the door with a package.
So I think, as you had said earlier about a child sitting on a parent's lap and how
Mhm.
important it is for the bond and to read to the really young child, I think school plays a huge role in the nurturing reading amongst children at this age group now, 8 years onwards.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Yeah, the difference between two different primary schools that I went to. One wasn't crazy about, didn't care about books, and the other one, they were so invested in our imagination and our reading ability.
You're
And it's
really,
such a
you're
difference.
really fostering that creative thinking ability.
And
And
I,
if you've got a teacher that is enthusiastic about reading, and not just reading for schoolwork, but reading for pleasure,
yeah,
you
and,
know, and to get them to share that. When I was in school a billion years ago, um, it was a requirement, but it never felt like a requirement, where every month you had to do a book report of some nature. So you chose the book. It was anything you wanted to read. And whether it was a written report, or you write a poem based on something in the book, or you make a painting, do a book cover, redo a book cover, or a diorama, a little action scene from the book. And you just got up and you talked to people about the book. And there was so much enthusiasm about that, you almost couldn't wait till the next month to get to the next book, wondering what you were going to do next.
and it's funny when I read to children, when I've read to different children in schools all over Ireland, and anytime I've read them, we've created almost like different children read different parts of the book.
Yeah.
And we create almost a play,
Yeah.
and it's good fun, and the children are involved in it and they love it, and we clap for those who took this part of Judy, this
Absolutely.
part of Eliza, and then they sit down and the hands go up again. Can I play Eliza, or can I play the hedgehog, or can I play some part, Mother
Yeah.
Badger or whatever? And they come up and they take it on board, and their chests are out and they're proud of what they're doing and they're making it happen.
And it gives them confidence, and it makes them feel valued, and it really engages them with the book. And it teaches them a lesson that in life you are going to play a lot of different roles, and you can do it.
Well, we better start recommending books, Mary. You
We
better
better start recommending books.
introduce
Yeah.
our
I'm
listeners.
going to start with another Tribes Press, a little gem from couple of years ago, wasn't it? Annie Piggles by John Butler, with lovely black and white illustrations by the wonderful J. Penn. And I like this book. It's a good book for people to sit down together and share. It can be shared in the classroom. It can be shared at home. When John wrote this book, I think I mentioned Morris Sendak and his business. He's not writing kids' books. He's just writing books. And I asked him, what age group do you see this for? And he just shook his head. It's a book. It's for everybody. And what it is it's like a little fable. We've got our main character, Annie Piggles, there he is, with his suitcase, that goes on a journey to find his happy ever after. He's tired with life, he's bored with life, he gets on a train, ends up going to a land of fairy tales where he meets some very familiar characters, but they're not quite the way he remembers them from the stories. And I think that's what's important, is not everything is the way it seems. And then he has to create different ways of navigating through this in order to come to his happy ever after, which is the place in which he's being himself.
And I think when I read this book, like obviously I've read it because we're the publisher, Tribes Press is the publisher of the book. But when I read this book, for 2 days afterwards, I remember like doing just non-specific things, making a cup of tea or getting groceries in the shop. And I was still thinking about it, because it actually really asks a question of you as a reader.
Exactly, yeah.
So why are we telling our children these fairy tales? Like, what's going on here? Why are we doing this? Because some of these fairy tales are quite horrific. The wolf and the pigs and the wolf eating Granny. The wolf eating Granny, and she and
those things are actually very important, but that goes back into a whole psychology and the development of human evolution. But they're very as to why, and it is that question: why do we tell our kids these stories? And why do these stories stick with us?
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, and what are we supposed to take from them? Fairy tales are generally cautionary tales, but they are tales about how to be in the world. And again, that thing of, all that glitters isn't gold. This isn't necessarily the way it is. What you're given isn't face value. You have to think about things.
And I think that's such a valuable book to an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old. Like,
Absolutely.
any year-old, to be honest.
Any year old.
I got from it.
It is just one of, like I said, one of those wonderful books that is great to sit down and share as a group.
Yeah. So
And
that's
see,
sorry. So that's
and
Annie
see what
Pickles
they
by
come up
John
with.
Butler. Sorry, Mary, I interrupted
Yeah.
you.
Annie Pickles by John Butler.
And that can be purchased at tribespress.com/shop.
Absolutely.
Online, your local.
And it's beautiful. It's just beautiful.
And what do we have next?
What we have next is a wonderful little book. It's full of fun and life, and yet deals with some very specific issues. This is Wolfie, Stage Fright by Lindsay Sedgwick. And the illustrator is Josephine Wolf. It's got, again, sort of little black and white illustrations. Let's see if I can find one. Throughout the book that really gives you, it highlights the pages and it really gives you the sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
It is about a little girl. It's sort of like a Cinderella kind of story, but with a lot of different twists to it. So it's a lovely little girl, Libby, and her mother is not there. Her father is sort of absent but present. He's working. He's got a lot on his mind. She's got the stepmother and the stepbrother. Stepbrother picks on her mercilessly, scares the life out of her, keeps talking to her about the big bad wolf. And one day she opens up a trunk in her bedroom and out pops this little creature like this named Wolfie. He's just like any other canine animal, except he can, his diet is very strange. His favorite food is stinky socks, and he can grow at will.
Oh.
So, whenever she needs him to, he can suddenly become really big. Libby just tries to, keep herself to herself and get through without drawing attention to herself, particularly from her stepbrother. But Wolfie ends up getting her the starring part in the school play. And she doesn't really want it, but maybe she does. And it is that thing of, you can do these things and you're not just a side note to all of these other people in your life. You come forward, you shine on your own, and that there is someone there for you, even if it's just a little purple wolf pup.
And it's that is the star of that is a little girl, because
the star of that is the little girl. Yes.
Yeah, and it's nice because although the world is changing, it's still quite a male dominated world, and the big brother can pick on the little sister.
Yeah.
He's almost allowed to do it still.
So it's dealing with a lot of things: family dynamics, blended families.
Yeah.
Trying to be who you really are, but still being relentlessly knocked down and told you can't be that, and she comes through and she shines beautifully.
That's a real story of hope. So for girls.
Yeah, it's a lovely book, and it's the first in a series. The second one will be out shortly. Wolfie, Stage Fright by Lindsay Sedgwick.
And we can recommend that for children that you want, they're feeling a little bit, their self-esteem maybe a little bit low, and you're just trying to give them that extra bit of confidence.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's really funny as well. It is really, it's some real laugh out loud moments.
I can see from the illustrations it must be.
And great for people who don't feel that way, in order to get them to understand, to develop some empathy. There are others.
Yeah.
And they get to shine too. And maybe the best thing to do is let them shine and be their friend,
Yeah.
and support them. So it's a lovely, lovely book, works on so many different levels and really funny. And that one's gorgeous. I also want to recommend Park Kenny is such a wonderful author. He wrote 10, his latest book, The Monsters of Rookhaven. They take these sort of stories that somewhere deep inside of us we know, but again, flips them a little bit
Okay.
so that we get a different view of it. 10, you can see real elements of The Wizard of Oz and that kind of thing in it, but something more.
So can
This
we
is the
skip?
one. This is one of his that I love.
Okay.
It's my favorite. It's the second one that he wrote that was published. It's called Pog, and this I think is a really good book for these times. Anytime really, but particularly these times. It is about a brother and sister, David and Penny. And after their mother has died, they move to the family's old house, which is back somewhere in the forest. It's what the mother always wanted to do. So the father takes them there. They're fulfilling their mother's wish. And dad says, it'll give us a fresh start. We can keep that memory of mom alive, but we can start again. Not so easy. And Penny is not really sure. The place seems sad and empty without mom. There's all kinds of, the father's quite depressed. He's lost his wife. The children, David and Penny, are having trouble dealing with this. And then they discovered from an old cupboard door that's been bolted and shut away and you're not supposed to open, that things are getting in from another realm.
Oh God. This
And
sounds
they're,
great. I
and
have
they're
to buy this book.
and they're not necessarily good things, but Pog is there. Pog is a little creature that comes to help. I'll just read from the back of the book here. It explains it better than I can. A small furry creature living in the roof, and there are other creatures too, less friendly ones, that seem to be multiplying. Only Pog's help can David and Penny save themselves and goodness in the world. And if they can resist the promises in the darkness, and of course the promises in the darkness are that thing of, we can bring your mother back. You don't have to live without her. And of course we know that that's a lie. It's got a lot of dynamics and a lot of different dynamics, but it is about this overcoming grief and loss and all the things, the father's there for them, but he's not there for them because sinking deeper into this loss-driven depression. David wants to be the big brother, of course, but he ends up getting promised things that aren't going to happen. It's a beautiful book, and it's about overcoming that. And it sounds like it might be kind of sad, and in places it is, but it is actually extremely joyous and triumphant.
I think that's the key because often we see parents or grandparents and they don't want to buy a book for a child that is sad. And I kind of think, God, that's such a tragedy because children are so good at processing grief.
It's an incredible tragedy. They need to process grief. They're better at it than we are.
Yeah, they're good. They're good at emotions mostly. For the most part, children are really good at expressing their emotions.
Absolutely.
And
they get it. Whatever's going on, they get it. But they get it on that feeling level. And as we grow up, we tend to intellectualize these things.
And run from it.
And we don't, oh no, I don't want anything that sounds too sad.
Yeah.
I don't want to upset them. Or that sounds too aggressive. I don't want to frighten them.
And I think parents forget this fundamental thing that children are grieving right through their childhood. They're grieving.
Oh, yes.
They're grieving the loss of friends because they transition from one school to the other. They are grieving the loss of a certain stage in their life, in their development. They're no longer 6. They're 8 now, and they have to be more advanced because they're supposed to be more advanced.
Yes, everybody expects it of them.
Yeah, they're
And
grieving all of those times in their lives, and then they could have a big brother or little brother, we say, or a little sister come into their lives, and then they're grieving the time that they had with their parents because the parents now have this baby and they can't be there for them. Children grieve a lot, and because they're transitioning so quickly. As adults, we don't transition as fast, so we don't have to let go of adulthood in that sense, where they're letting go of certain developmental stages of their lives. So it's tough, and they're good at it, but they always seem to be able to find their way through it and find the joy in their lives. And it's a fantastic thing to have a book that puts laughter in the middle of grief.
Yes.
And says, look, it can be really tough right now, but you know what? The sun will come up tomorrow.
Yeah. You will overcome these things. You will learn how to deal with these things. Another one that kind of touches on that and is a great adventure story. Beautiful, beautiful book. The Stormkeeper's Island by Catherine Doyle. And there's a whole series of these. Is there 4 or 3 now? I think there's 4 now. And it's a thing of, it's a young boy. His father is gone. His father died. His mother picks them up. They are from Erinmore. They lived on Erinmore. Mother picks them up before he was born, actually, and takes them to Dublin because she can't deal with living there because it just reminds her.
Yeah.
She has mental health issues because of the grief. And one day he is old enough, he is sent off to Erinmore to stay for the summer with the grandfather. The mother needs some time. She needs to be taken care of medically. And he's sent to Erinmore to stay with a grandfather that he'd never met. And what he encounters there is magic.
Fantastic.
And of course, there's this whole thing about, I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in this. This can't be happening. But yet it is. And sometimes it's, as it says on the back of the book, it's very hard to believe in magic until it grips you by the shoulders and shakes you awake. There is an element of ancient Irish mythology in here. There is this business of what are you going to do with all this new information and this new power that you find that only you have, and you have to protect not just yourself and your mother and your grandfather, but the world.
Whoa.
From these kind of things being released on it. That's fabulous, wonderful fantasy, heartfelt, just an amazing story. It's great escape, but it speaks a truth that I think we all need to hear.
I wanted to ask you a question, actually, Mary, because you review thousands of books every year.
Well, hundreds anyway, but yeah.
Well, you've reviewed thousands of them by now, but hundreds.
Yeah.
I can meet some people who say to me, fantasy, I wouldn't give fantasy to a child. Children don't need fantasy in their lives. That's just an abomination. Do you know?
No.
And
yeah, they keep trying.
Struck by that. I'm actually struck by that. Tell me what you think about this.
I think fantasy is necessary. It's very necessary. It fires the imagination and it gives children, again, we go back to giving them tools to deal with things. They may not actually be fighting dragons. They may not actually be coming face to face with the Morrigan. But those things are actually present in their daily lives on subtle levels. And it gives them a way of seeing things that allows them to develop practical tools to get through some of the most outrageous things that happen in their lives. And it also helps them develop a belief in the unlikely, so that, look, we're faced with unlikely things all the time. I mean, take a look at a pandemic. If a year ago somebody told you this was going to happen, how likely would you think that was going to be? You just wouldn't.
Oh, I tell you what, if back last February, somebody said to me, Marguerite, you have a startup business. It's going to shut down on the 12th of March. And it's going to be closed. The doors, well, we're online, obviously,
Yeah.
but everybody be working from home. The doors will be closed for a year. And if they told me in that time you would produce a picture book to support children through the COVID pandemic, and it would it would be translated into 8 languages.
Yeah.
And you would produce another book, the final book in the Cafe series, KidsTime, and it would be rated in the top 10 in Litvox Irish children's books for 2020. I would have said, you're joking. How could you do all of that in such a difficult time? But I tell you what, like, there's a fantasy, I would have thought. That's a fantasy. Your dream.
Oh, yeah.
Fantasy is so important for children because
I think it's important for all of us. What I've always said about fantasy is just the real world wearing other clothes.
Because, even I remember, like, when I was a child, like, we had Narnia, C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
I loved C.S. Lewis when I was a child, and like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But there were so many lessons that you could teach a child through the creatures or through the characters, fantasy characters, that you can't teach a child by saying you must understand this now. You can't.
And I think fantasy inspires a different way of thinking, a creative way of thinking. There are solutions. Here are people going through unthinkable things. Just, they're magical, they're weird. They would never happen in real life, but they come up with solutions for them. And it inspires an ability to think creatively. It fires, look, I like a good sort of realistic, lovely novel as well. But that just shows me real life and people going through things and people having a nice story or having a life story, what have you. And I take that from my frame of reference. When you throw fantasy into the mix, you lose your frame of reference and you have to think up other ground to stand on. Yeah. And I think that's a very important thing for children to learn. And since we talked about KidsTime, the last book, let's talk about Kathy's books because I would highly recommend them. I've got a few of them here. It's grabbing from the stacks upstairs. Beginning with Kathy's Earth, as you well know. I love these books. I also have Kathy's Water, which is my favorite because it is very, very, it deals with the emotions. And then the last one, KidsTime. Beautiful books, wonderful fantasy. This business of stepping through a drawing on the wall, and there you are in a completely different land. And there's access back and forth between the two. You have the two children. You have Eliza and Jamie, who are coming of age, really. From the very first, they are about to step into who they are going to be in the world. And there are, as we know, lots of trials and tribulations and lots of different events that happen before you can step into being yourself. And through this book, it takes them through all of that. It gives them allies. It gives them friends. It gives them a new frame of reference for which to view things in the world. It lets them really look at their relationship both with the people in this world and the people in the fantastical world of light, Cathias. And the call throughout the whole thing is that essential question that I think is really the only question worth answering, which is, who are you going to be? Who do you want to be? And marvelous escapism at the same time. It teaches so many lessons. It tells such a beautiful, important story. I will say to anyone listening to this, please start with the first one.
Kathy, sir.
Yeah, Cathius Earth, and read right the way through. You know, can you pick them up at any point along the line and read them? Well, yeah, you could, but you're going to get so much more out of it from starting at the very beginning. That will give you the understanding as to what exactly is going on, what has happened so far.
A lot of Irish myth and legend in it.
Huge amount of Irish myth and legend.
You have the landscape of Ireland in it, the burn, the dragons live on the Aran Island. Yeah. That's their home.
Yeah, the fantasy world of Tirnanog, you know, and all of that. I think again we go back to it's in the DNA already, you know, and it sort of brings that up and allows children to understand not only who they want to be in the world, but who we really are here.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And even if there are many, many differences in people that they encounter along the way, in the creatures and people, that's okay too. It gives a foundation of be who you are and be it in the best way that you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really like that. Yeah. Beautiful book. And the last book, I wept. It was just magnificent.
But just to say, the author of the Cafe series is myself, Marguerite Tonery. If they are looking for it, it is me. So that's probably why I kept a little bit quiet on that one. But because I'm always interrupting you, Mary, I'm sorry about that. But the Cafe series is Marguerite Tonery, and those books are available again at Tribes Press, your local publisher. Our last book, let's see.
Our last one. I'm going to, again, another series. People love series.
Yeah.
People love series for their children. Children love series. You get characters and a world.
I think it's because it doesn't end. You know, you want to know what happened next. And you get to find out what happened next, you know.
This is the Wild Magic Trilogy by Celine Kiernan. It begins with Begone the Raggedy Witches. Moves on to The Little Grey Girl. You see that? You can. And ends last year, the last one, with The Promise Witch. And this is the story of Mop.
Who illustrated the covers there, Mary?
Yeah. I do know this, but I'll check. Jessica Courtney Tickle.
Well done, Jessica Courtney Tickle. They're beautiful covers.
It's got to be one of my favorite series that I've ever read. It's about a young girl named Mup. She lives with her mother and her baby brother, and her father, who is at the opening of the first book, Begone the Raggedy Witches. He is away. He works out on the drilling platforms, things like that. So he's away, working away. They are driving home. They're driving home from the hospital because Auntie is in the hospital. I was going to find the one thing I wanted to say. It opens like this. The moon was strange that night. The witches came and Auntie died. Wow. And that's the first line.
That's a great opening.
And you're suddenly going, okay, I need to find out what's going on here. And it is just basically about loss. It's about family life. Again, being who you are, fighting for the greater good. It's just an incredible, incredible series. They have to cross over the river into the witch's burrow because her grandmother, the old queen, is doing really awful things, and they have to dethrone her and put Witch's Burrow back to right.
So we need a hero. We need a hero.
We need a hero. And the hero ends up being Mup. And she takes it on, I don't want to say accidentally, because she doesn't know that her family is actually from the Witch's Burrow. She doesn't know anything about this. They've protected her from it. And suddenly she's thrown back into it. And she ends up having to be the one that's protected.
Yeah, isn't that kind of that is that's in the Cafe series as well, where
Yeah,
they don't know their history, but they're finding it out through the mythical creatures of Catholics are telling them
yeah,
what their history is, and
yeah,
they spend their time trying to figure out who these people are. Like their mum seems to know about Catholics, but she doesn't never speaks about it.
exactly.
And you have that again there in this, where there's a history here, but the child doesn't know what the history is.
The
But
child has no idea.
and it's kind
And
of
yet
yeah.
it's full of all these very dramatic things that are happening.
Mm,
Auntie does die, but Auntie comes back because the witches enter their home in this world.
mm. Well,
And
okay.
she has to, pick up the mother. Look, it's time. Let's go. And they cross over into the witch's burrow. The reason they cross over into the witch's burrow is because her grandmother, the old queen, has kidnapped the father.
Okay.
Okay, so they go to get her dad back
Mm.
and end up discovering that this whole history behind them, and getting rid of the old queen, which means the mother has to step up and take the role she does not want, which is to be the new queen.
Tell us the name of that book again. The series,
It's the Wild Magic trilogy. It starts with Begone the Raggedy
and
Witches,
it's by
Celine Kiernan,
perfect.
and published by Walker Books.
And is that the end of our titles, or do we have one more? That's the end. That's the end.
That's that. Well, we're going to leave it at that for
I
this
think
one.
so.
Yeah,
That was a
because
lot of books.
that's a
We,
lot of books.
we'll
Yeah,
have to come back at another time, Mary, and talk to you again about the books that you're reviewing and what you recommend. It's
absolutely.
wonderful talking to you as always. So all of these books were 8, 12, and onwards, that we have in this section. And Mary, um, it's great to have somebody that you can tap into that has this wealth of knowledge, and you're
Well,
that
thank you.
somebody. So
As you can see, I will talk about books forever.
and that's okay. I could sit here forever, but we better let the listeners go back to their books.
Go back.
So all of these books, we want to say to people, purchase your books through your local. You can purchase them online through your local publishers. For example, tribespress.com/shop. But if
Yeah,
you have a local independent bookshop as well, purchase the
yeah.
books through your local independent bookshop
And go
online.
online or ring them or
Ring.
anything. They'll get them for you.
So,
And you mentioned Litvox earlier. Litvox is a new incentive. It's an online shop. And if you can get them from Litvox. If they don't have it on their shop, you can ask them if they can get it if you can't find it. They're
so,
very, very good.
so we're very lucky to have so much in this country, in Ireland, but also like these is online, so people can purchase anywhere in the world. They can purchase any of these
Exactly.
books,
Exactly.
from the magical to the mysterious. Um, Thank you very much, Mary, for
Thank
taking the
you.
time out of your day to talk to us, and we will be back soon. And we look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite. Talk to you soon.